Hi everyone. So we're going to talk about melody and harmony today. Let's get started. Melody is, per Grove Music Online, defined as pitched sounds arranged in musical time. And harmony is defined as the combining of notes simultaneously to produce chords and successfully chord progressions. And both of these definitions are really general for reasons you'll see pretty shortly if you haven't already realized it. Melody and harmony and the relationship between them can sound very different depending on the situation, to the point where it can be sometimes even hard to identify the melody. So we're going to examine this in 3 examples. The first is the track Shadow from Final Fantasy VI, the Super Nintendo version for those interested in multiple versions. We're going to also look at the Kakariko Village theme, again the Super Nintendo version, and the Pallet Town theme from Pokemon Red or Blue. We're going to be primarily checking these out in Cirrus Retro. First is the Shadow theme from Final Fantasy VI. That's track 13 on Cirrus Retro. So this is an example of melody accompanied by chords. The melody, which is just in the DSP1 channel, sounds like a flute like sound, very airy, high in pitch, and it's just a single channel, and it's accompanied by guitar sounds, which are in tracks 2, 3, 4, and 5. So let's play those. So those are just chords. All of the pitches happen roughly at the same time, and there are multiple pitches happening. In that case, the pitches are E, G, and B with an E on top. And then in track 6, there's a double bass sound, very clearly a plucked double bass. I think it is part of the harmony set up by the guitars. And then in track 7 and 8 have a drum, hi-hat, very simple rhythm track. So that's taking apart Shadow from Final Fantasy VI. So just to recap, we have track 1, which has the melody. 2, 3, 4, 5 have guitar chords. Track 6 is a bass track, and track 7 and 8 are rhythms. So let's just layer them on top of each other, starting from the harmony. Nice. So that's the Shadows theme track from Final Fantasy VI. The next track we're going to look at is the Kakariko Village theme from Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. This theme also happens in later Zelda games. I'm actually more familiar with the Nintendo 64 Ocarina of Time example of Kakariko Village, and you might notice, if you're also familiar with that version, that the harmony is different in the later versions, but I'm going to stick to this one because it's easy for you to access, and also my transcriptions are of this one. So this is an example of a melody set to chords, but the chords are in a different form in that they are arpeggiated. So instead of all of the pitches happening all at once, like in the Shadow theme, where they happened as a guitar, they're happening here, tracks 2, 3, and 4. Split up. So if you put all of those pitches that you're hearing together so that everything started at the same time, they'd create a chord. But in this case, they're creating something called an arpeggio, which is a chord that is spread out over time. So that's the harmony. And the melody happens in tracks 1, 5, and 6. This is a really interesting melody. The melody is just da 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 da. But there's different versions of the melody happening depending on the channel. Track 1 has like a string sound, orchestral string sounding track. Track 5 has more of a waveform synthy sort of sound. Sounds very percussive, almost like a bell. And DSP6 is also kind of an orchestral string sound. And the really interesting thing about tracks 1 and 6 is that they're slightly offset from each other. And I think the intention behind this, again, you can't really know intention of composers that don't tell you themselves for certain. But to me, when they're all together, it creates a sense of depth that might not happen if you only are listening to everything happening at the same time. So we have two different timbres combining, and then they're playing with the timing between tracks 1 and 6. Tracks 7 and 8 aren't used in this as far as I can tell, but all together, you have a beautiful melody in, if we're going to refer to the meter from last unit, in 6/8 time and with a lot of charm. So now we're going to talk about Pokemon, and in particular the Pallet Town theme from Pokemon Red or Blue, depending on which game you played, if you played these. These are for the Game Boy, and the music in this example, which is the most complicated example that we will check out in this video, is contrapuntal. Counterpoint is a technique in Western classical music writing where two melodies are complementary to each other, and between the two of them there is a sense of harmony, but there's no chords necessarily like in the previous two examples. Instead, you just have two melodies. So if we listen to square 1 and square 2 together, you have in the first little phrase, you have this melody, the main melody, that I think really stands out as the highest pitched melody. And then you have a secondary melody. And then together they form this cute duet. This is also accompanied by the third channel, which is just a bass line of sorts. So altogether you have 3 parts. So the melodies are really interacting to create a sense of harmony. And if you ask, oh, but which line is the harmony? The answer really is all of them, because they all come together and form that harmony. So it's not in any one channel like it was for the other examples where the harmony was either in one single channel on its own or a group of channels that were clearly together. Each of these 3 lines instead stands on its own as its own individual melody, and that is a very typical hallmark of counterpoint. The reason why it's like this is out of kind of necessity, because if you wanted to create an interesting track with variation that was interesting to listen to, with the limitations of this hardware, which the Game Boy only has 4 channels, and the fourth channel, the noise channel, is not used at all in this track. So really it's only three layers. You can't really necessarily afford to have one whole channel dedicated to creating harmony. Another thing to consider is that these channels, as far as I know, could only create one pitch at a time. So composers of soundtracks to NES and Game Boy games were really limited by the hardware, and because of this, they used techniques like counterpoint to compensate for the fact that they just simply didn't have the tracks. You'll notice in the Super Nintendo examples that there are many more tracks, and therefore you can have a lot more separation between the tracks. So that is discussed extensively in the video by David Bennett that we're going to talk about in the unit on music from Pokemon, so stay tuned for that. As you've noticed here, there is a lot of variation in how melody and harmony can present itself in music, and that's okay, that's part of the fun. The first step for me when I'm working with a new track is to identify the melody. This can be kind of tricky. For example, in Pokemon Red, if you asked, hey, where's the melody? The answer would be, yes, it's everywhere. There's melodies in each track. But really do your best. In a lot of contexts, it's going to be pretty clear which tracks have the melody, or you can identify which instrument has the melody if you hear an instrument, unless the composer does something very nutty, in which case I suggest maybe coming back later when you have a little more vocabulary to work with, or you can come to office hours and we can chat about it, because I would love that. In cases then, when you feel comfortable and have identified the melody, once you've done that, go ahead and listen to the other layers, and you'll be well on your way to dissecting your game music track. So that's it for this video. Now, I recommend that you check out these tracks for yourself in Cirrus Retro. I'll leave links in the description and also on Canvas if you're taking this class. Go ahead and compare it to the notation I've provided and descriptions in the video. See what you think, see how they match up, compare it to yours. And I also recommend checking out other tracks in these games to see if you can pick out melodies yourself as an exercise. I'll leave some tracks that I think would be a good jumping off point for that sort of stuff in the description. And most importantly, have fun, because this music's cool and has a lot of very interesting, very excellent writing in it. So enjoy, and see you in the next one.